Hey, what's up? John Sonmez here, and today I'm talking with a friend of mine who has gone through an amazing transformation. I thought it'd be really cool to have him on the channel and talk about the transformation that he's made, because I know a lot of you have seen my transformation, and you thought that was pretty amazing. But you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Joe Ducard on is because his transformation, when you look at his pictures and you just see you know, who he is today, it's more than just a physical transformation, right? And this is one of those things that I tell you guys about a lot, is that it's possible to completely transform yourself. In fact, I think a lot of the mental transformations that you make result in physical transformation, which is not just in just losing weight. Sometimes it's just like it's in your appearance, it's how you present yourself, it's all of those things. So welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. So I was amazed to see your before and after pics. They're they're pretty incredible. I think is how much did you weigh at your heaviest weight?
I'll send you a link to them after. Maybe you can put them over the video or something like that so that people can see. At my heaviest, I was approaching about 350 pounds.
Wow.
At my heaviest, yeah. And it was a whole different look. You know, I had my glasses on. I mean, I still wear glasses, but I'll wear contacts when I go out. And, you know, I had the long hair, dressed in all black. And it was just a whole, I was just very insecure. And I really didn't like how I looked and anything like that. But I mean, I just didn't know really much better back in the day. But I wasn't happy with it for sure.
Yeah. And I think it'd probably be pretty hard for a lot of people watching today to imagine imagine that, right? But like, I mean, what do you think when you see your old pictures or when you think of your old self? Like, what goes through your head?
It's crazy. You know, I look back at it, and, you know, one thing that I do think of is, like, I can't really knock the old me, because I think being so far gone that I was back in the day, and then having to make such a transformation, really made me who I was. So I don't really look at the old me too much with like a lot of hatred or whatever. I look at it more so with like, man, like I give myself more props now for how far I came, right? Like, I can't believe how different I was back then, you know. And that's kind of the friends I hung out with and how I grew up. You know, we were pretty closed-minded and judgmental and didn't really have much experience. And I didn't really know too much, especially that you could transform a lot of your personality and a lot of these things. I always had these big dreams, but I kind of got caught up in the day-to-day stuff. And before you knew it, I was really too far gone. And
yeah,
it's crazy looking back at it.
Yeah, a lot of people, you know, have that. They don't like the phrase, you know, the fake it till you make it.
Right.
But I don't know. That was something that really defined my life. Was this idea of like imagining who I wanted to become, and then becoming. And it's like you pretend to be that, and then you eventually become that. At least that was my experience. What do you think about that? And what caused you to go through your transformation?
Well, you know, when I first started, that particular phrase that you mentioned, and right there, fake it till you make it, was one of my foundational phrases as well. I was like, I need to try these new things that are not me, right? You know, a lot of people, when they want to make a transformation, they're like, yeah, but, you know, is that really going against who I am, right? And is that, that's not me. That's a big excuse, right? That's not me. That's not me. That's too different. But the thing is, right, the definition of insanity, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got, right? So you have to make a change, and you have to try out completely new things. And what I like to say to people is, if you are willing to try new things and try new habits and take on this new thing, even if it's just a fake action in the beginning, a lot of times you'll find that this new thing is more you than a lot of the old things, right? So you have to be open-minded to try that new stuff. You know, my catalyst was really, like we both said, is I had these big goals. You know, I wanted to look like a superhero. I wanted to have money. I wanted to, you know, definitely have some adventures with women and travel and have great friends and great relationships and be somebody who I was proud of. And I saw that I was so far gone from that at that age. And then I just, you know, I had seen and heard about other people who had made transformations. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to jump into this head first. I've had enough. You know, I remember there was a picture someone posted of me online, and I looked at the picture. I was like, man, I can't believe how fat I look in that picture. That's really me. I let myself go. Because the thing is, it's not like you just wake up and you're terrible overnight. A lot of these things are a progressive thing. Like, I just gained more weight and more weight and more weight. And I got more antisocial and more antisocial. And then eventually I got to a point where I was like, that's not anywhere near the goals that I want to be. And then that was like, look, I just got to do whatever it takes to make the shift and make no excuses. And faking it till you make it was one of the big things. Just fake it, try it out, and then eventually it became the new me, for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how that works. A lot of people, like you said, are very opposed to that idea. But one thing I always tell people is that it's like who you want to be, that's who you actually are. It's just that you've got so much shit that's preventing you from being, like, you wouldn't want to be this person that you're, quote, faking it to be, unless that's who you truly are. It just that you haven't, you have all these barriers in your way of actually becoming who you are. And it's like, because you wouldn't have the desire to be that person if wasn't what you're meant to be. It's just so many people never reach their potential.
Yeah, it's potential. It's a calling, right? It's that thing that you really have inside. You're right. That's the true us. That's really our destiny. That's the word, destiny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how did you go about this then? Like, what was the? I mean, because it's not easy to lose. I mean, you lost over 100 pounds, like over 120 pounds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, what did you do? Like, what was the process? What exactly did you go through? Because, and again, like I said, I think, you know, it's apparent in your pictures as well. Because sometimes you see pictures of people that have like a fat loss transformation, and it's like, you know, they're holding up the newspaper and then they're, you know, 100 pounds lighter. But you look at their face and it's the same face, right? And what I mean by that is, yes, it's but when you look at, one thing that impressed me is when I looked at your picture and I met you in person and I see your picture now, there's more going on. Like, you can just tell that there's more going on than just a physical transformation. So what was that? Like, what did you do? What was your training? What was your process of making this transformation?
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, you have a lot of social intuition, so you perceive that, you know, like, one thing I tell people is, it looks crazy, the pictures of the weight loss. I said, but the craziest part was who I became. Right? Because back in the day, I was so shy. I was so awkward. I could never sit down and talk to you in this manner confidently with a smile on my face, all these types of things. I was very shy. I was very introverted, and loneliness was actually the biggest factor for change for me. I was very lonely, and I got into dating and social dynamics. That was a big thing, right? I've been a dating and self-development coach for men for, this year it'll be 11 years that I started.
Wow. Okay.
Started in 2007 was when I started my transformation. So it'll be going on 11 years now since I made that change. And for me, it was a lot of pain of the loneliness. You know, I wanted to have friends. I wanted to have women. I wanted to have a great social life and rich experiences, but I didn't have them. So I started working on my social skills first. And a lot of social skills and things that I read back in the day said, your looks don't matter as much. It's more about, you know, what you say and what you do and your personality. So I worked on my personality. I worked on my thoughts about myself and all that. And eventually I said, well, if I'm working on the personality, why don't I work on the fitness as well? Why don't I do the whole package, you know, jump in, make the complete transformation? That's when I saw that photo that someone had posted. And I was like, man, I just look really heavy as well. So that's when I kicked in the diet and exercise. Now, I had already been lifting weights a little bit, about 3 days a week. And my whole thing was, all right, I need to revamp all this. I started doing cardiovascular training, high intensity training, more than long steady state stuff. So I did opposing muscle groups as well. So go from one muscle group to the next. So the workout was much quicker, and then added in that cardiovascular training. And the biggest thing for me was the diet, was cleaning up the diet. I cut out sodas. I used to drink sodas a lot. I used to have fast food, pizzas, you know, big sandwiches and things like that. I started to cut all those things out. And once I started to go more towards whole wheat and whole grains, and then eventually to, you know, lower carbohydrates, higher proteins, things like that. I mean, the weight really shot off because I was doing the training and I got the diet really in track. A great thing about when you first do a diet is your body is so used to a certain way of eating, you know, junk, there are certain things like that, that once you start to make even little changes, you'll start to make a lot of progress. So I definitely had a starting point that was ready for change. I was eating a lot of calories, a lot of bad foods, and I was able to start to clean up that food and replace it with better choices, you know, keeping the protein high, and then doing cardiovascular and weight training. You know, it was definitely no magic. It was just, I wanted to do the work. I had the pain behind me. I had the pain of how I felt, of how I looked, and the pain of the loneliness. And that pain just drove me. And I said, I want to live that ideal. And if I don't start working towards it now, it's never going to happen. And there was no excuses. I just said, hey, let's do whatever it takes. And I really if I think back to those days, one of my favorite things to say is my entire day was devoted to self-development.
Yeah.
I wake up in the morning, I'd either go to a morning class, because I was in college as well, morning class, or I'd go to work, audiobooks on the way to work. I moved furniture, so I listened to audiobooks.
Yeah.
I was at work, I read at lunch. This was before, social media and Facebook was barely around. There was no Instagram, no Snapchat, no smartphones even. So I didn't have any distractions. And I would go to the gym after work, then maybe a night class, then I'd read more. I'd go out at night to approach women and talk to people and work on my social skills. I'd come home and journal. And a lot of times I wake up and do that exact same thing every single day. Sometimes, 5 to 7 nights out, I would even go out to socialize with people. And I just jumped in head first, and I really went all or nothing and said, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And that was, and I made pretty huge leaps in about a year. It took me. So it was pretty
crazy. Okay. Yeah. It's again, I think a lot of people that are watching now are probably like, it'll be good when I can show the picture and everything. But it's I think one argument I always have is, are you familiar with the term incel?
What's that?
Involuntarily celibate.
Oh, that's probably what I was for sure. Yeah.
So there's a big thing now, like there's a whole community and everything. And it's really interesting because it's like a lot of these guys, like they think that there's no hope for them, that they're basically like, they're on the 1 to 10 scale, they're like a 5 or a 4. So they're fucked because all these girls, they only want guys that are like 8 or 9 or above. And so they're basically like, they have no choice in life, and there's nothing that they can do. But I don't know. What would you say to that? Well,
it's a good point that you bring up. It's a great point that you bring up. And now if I think about it, when I think about that old me, like when those first pictures were taken, I was definitely incel, and I was involuntarily not having any action because I believed back then that you couldn't change those things. Okay. Right. I knew that you could get into shape. That was one thing I did know. I knew I could clean up the diet and do the cardio and get into shape, but I had no clue. Like I really grew up believing that women either liked you or they didn't, right? You're either a social guy or you weren't. I really, truly believed that, right? People were introverted or extroverted. These labels that you put, right? You're popular or you're not popular. These labels were your label, and that's it. That's all you got. And then I read, Neil Strauss's book, The Game, and I got into Tony Robbins and learned about all this change that people could make. And I learned that it was possible. Once I found out that it was possible to make a change, and that you could actually do it, you could change your social skills, you could change your confidence. I mean, one of the first CDs of Tony Robbins that I listened to talked about identity. And he's saying, be careful how you define yourself and how you let other people define you. And these labels and these things that we live into are not set in stone. And once I heard that, I said, man, I am changing those labels. I'm changing who I am. And I'm going to really make this transformation. And before I had learned from those guys that it was possible. That's why it's cool. And I thank you for, doing this and sharing, your story and my story and these transformational stories, because we could help inspire people. And it was stories like this that inspired us, right, to make changes as well. So I had that inspiration. The 4-minute mile, I saw it was possible, right? And I saw that a transformation could be made. And I said, if someone else can do it, one man could do, so can another. That was another one of my foundational statements. And then I just jumped in head first and didn't look back. There was nothing to look back to, right? Loneliness and being overweight and being unhappy was the only thing I had to go back to. So I did whatever it took. There was no other road for me, really.
Yeah. No, definitely Tony Robbins had a big influence on me as well. And it's kind of crazy because, like a lot of people just don't even, when I say it, they just don't believe it. But I used to be extremely shy, like so shy. Like I wouldn't even get on the phone and make a doctor's appointment. That's how shy I was. Like my parents used to have to call up for me, and they're like, just at least talk. I'm like, no. That's how shy I was. But now, like, I mean, I'll talk to anyone. Like it doesn't matter, as you've seen. But people don't
believe it when they see you now. They probably can't believe it. They're like, oh, no way. This guy was a beautiful, in shape, social, intelligent, funny, all these things. And the charisma, that's the word, the charisma and all the stuff you have in your personality. People like to assume that was naturally there, but it comes from, like yourself, from hard work, man.
Yeah, no, it takes work. That's the thing, and that's the thing is like I think today, like I said with the whole incel thing, I've done a couple of videos on it, but it's really sad because, whereas Tony Robbins and all these Think and Grow Rich and like all these kind of like authors that we kind of listened to that kind of helped us to realize that anything was possible. There's a lot of community today that are gathering around this whole, men going their own way movement and the whole incel thing. And they're reinforcing this belief that, no, it's not possible, that you have to be a quote Chad. You have to have like, facial aesthetics of an 8 or 9. And otherwise you're screwed in life. And girls are only going to like that. And it kind of, it puts them in this box where they're getting reinforced. They're getting the wrong reinforcement, which is so harmful because they're like solidifying their identity. Like you said, I think the biggest thing is that identity. And when you change that identity, then everything else changes to match whatever you believe your identity is.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. For sure.
So with the diet part, did you actually have a specific diet that you were following? Did you like how regimented were you, or were you literally just making better choices?
I say the better choices thing because there definitely were certain rules, right? Like, there's 2 types of ways to really make big changes, right? I think one way is like I did and just went gung ho and jump all the way in, right?
Yeah.
And just, I'm going to do whatever it takes, complete change, work out, do the whole thing, right? That can definitely work for sure. But for people having a real tough time getting it going, it may be one change, right? Like the book, The One Thing is another, like there's so many books written about and concepts about just changing one little thing. So if you're really bad, one simple thing, maybe I'm going to cut out sugar out of it, right? Or I'm going to cut out wheat and bread, right? Like I remember I was home last year and I was eating bad for like 3 weeks and I was traveling a bit. And I was like, oh man, it's kind of tough to get back into my diet and do all this stuff again. So what I did is I said, let me just make one rule. And the one rule was that I couldn't eat bread. I'm going to cut bread out. So that cut out sandwiches, it cut out the desserts, all the wheat that I cut out. It cut out a lot of bad things that I was eating. And then from that, then I got into a little bit more of tracking my calories and all that stuff. But making that one change had got me started on it.
Right.
So that can be one way to do it, is making a simple change. Me personally, I had things regimented for sure. I think I eat, 4 to 6 times a day. I forgot what the number was back then, but there's a certain amount of protein I was eating each meal. And I didn't really track fat that much. So I had a high protein, and then I made sure the carbohydrates were complex carbs. So if it was wheat, it was whole wheat. If it was rice, it was brown rice, vegetables and things like that. It was just those cleaner sources of carbohydrates to cut out the sugar and the refined stuff. And that was the first change I made. And then eventually I cut those out really low, and I was eating, very low carbohydrates with a cheat day or a cheat meal here and there kind of thrown in. That was eventually what I did for the diet. But initially that worked.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things is like when you're very overweight, it's a little bit easier because you can lose the weight much faster. As you start to cut down, then you have to be a little bit more strict and more regimented for sure.
You have more room to play with. You have more, one guy talks about fat loss as like different cards you could play. Right? One card could be cutting out sugar. One could be switching to complex carbs. One could be lowering your carbs, lowering your calories, adding in cardio, speeding up your workouts, right? There's all these little things that you can do to make changes. And when you're so far gone, you're not really working out and you're not eating that well, then you have so much room. So it's actually, I think it is better now looking back to just make a change here and there and then eventually add more changes, right? Because like you said, once you're already eating really clean and working out, then it becomes tougher to make those changes. But definitely just adding 1 or 2 elements in, we'll start to see some progress for sure.
Yeah, cool. Now, what about the side? I think, I read, I think on your bio that you said that the first night that you went out to a nightclub, you basically puked. So how did you get over that? Because I think there's a lot of, one of the things that I always tell guys when I'm coaching them is that, look, it's like you think that like just getting the guts to talk to one girl is enough, like, or a couple girls in the night. Like, you're gonna have to talk to like 300 before you get you're gonna the numbers are so much more than what you think they are. How did you get the guts? Like, how did you get the courage to be able to do that, especially coming from, obviously, like, probably when you first, I mean, when you first started doing this, you probably were not in shape. You were, right? So, or maybe you were, I don't know. How did you go through that process?
You know, if I think back to it, you know, there's a quote out there that says something like your desire has to be like stronger than the discomfort that you want, right? So I had a lot of desire, even though the thing was uncomfortable, right? And another thing that did drive me as well was I had such pain in my life. You know, the loneliness was so bad that I said, I'll go through some discomfort, and I know it'll pay off long term to get rid of that pain, right? That's really what it was. And, you know, I remember that night I almost didn't go out. I was driving to this really popular beach bar in New Jersey where I'm from. And I was driving there. I said, man, just turn the car around, go home. So I was going there by myself, right?
Yeah.
Turn the car around, just go home. It's no problem. Not everybody has to do this. You don't have to do this. And then I sat and thought, I said, if I give into this fear, right? Just because I'm nervous, if I give into this now, then this could start a cascade of me forming this habit of giving into my fear for the rest of my life.
Right.
I knew that facing the fear was going to lead to good results. And I did it. I remember that night out, I had a great night. I remember I got like 4 girls' phone numbers, reconnected with an old best friend that became still one of my best friends to this day. And like, it was so worth it going out that night, but I had so much fear. And in that moment I said, you know, I can't give into this now. I read a great book back in the day called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Susan Jeffers, right? And one thing she said was that, you know, the short-term pain that you'll feel from facing a fear is nothing compared to the long-term pain that you'll have if you just give into it, right? So I just knew that long-term pain of loneliness and everything was already so terrible that I had to really suck it up. I had to really be brave, and I had to really make it happen. Now, for me, it was a big deal, right? You know, I coach guys that went away to college or go grab a drink with their friends here, and that's really not that big a deal to go to a bar or go to a social gathering or something and talk to, you know, and just, you know, make an effort to talk to girls. It's not that big a deal. But I've been sober my whole life. I've never drank, and I never been in those environments. So the environment was very scary for me as well too. And, you know, you could see perception is reality, right? My perception was that place was a big, scary thing and all that. And for most people who are more normal than I was, it's really not that big a deal to go to somewhere social. And the only hard part is actually doing, you know, an actual approach or talking to somebody, which could be as simple as just getting close to another group of people that you want to talk to and just saying hi and introducing yourself. So I like to make it as easy as possible for my students now, but back in the day, because I was so far gone, it was a really big deal for me. But like I said, thinking logically that long-term pain was going to be so bad, I had to just face it in the moment and do what it takes. And I built that habit the whole way of when things make me nervous, then that was a sign that I had to do them and had to face it. Yeah, so that was one of the things I learned. That's
a rule I've made for myself as well. Because you know, one thing I learned with fear is that, like, if you don't face the fear, it's like the fear levels up, it gains experience, and then like the next time that you face the fear, it's like it grows, so it becomes worse. So I developed a big phobia of flying on airplanes, and it was all started because one time I had a fear and I decided not to take a flight, and then it grew, and then it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and then pretty soon it got to the point where it's like a crippling fear, and now to overcome it became really difficult. I mean, eventually I did, but then I think after that I kind of swore off in my head. I said, look, next time I feel fear, I'm going for it, like no matter what, because it's worse. Like it's never going to just go away. Like you have to kill the monsters when they're babies, right? It's like,
that's a great point. Yeah, because they compound and they get worse. So you might as well do them as soon as you can to get over them, right? That's what people do. Like people who are naturally social, they were social when they were younger, right? So they never it never became a big monster to them. That's
it was definitely always a big monster for me. I mean, I was so ridiculously shy. Like I think when the whole time when I was high school, I don't think I ever talked to a girl. Like I was like that much, like just petrified. But okay, so one of the things that I think, you know, is the whole facing rejection thing, right? So here's what happens. A lot of guys I'll talk to, they're like, oh well, I heard what you said. Yeah, you know, looks don't matter. You know, obviously they do to some degree, but essentially, like, it's about being confident in status. That's the most important thing. So I went up and I talked to 10 girls, and all 10 of them shot me down. So obviously I'm just an ugly duckling, and what you're saying is bullshit. What do you think about that, about the whole rejection side of it?
So I actually wrote an entire book on rejection and fear of rejection and fear of approaching women. It's called Fearless Approach, and it's on Amazon. But you know, there's a few things in that are really important. Now, the first thing for me was there was a phrase, there's an old NLP phrase, I think from Milton Erickson, that said, "There's no failures, only feedbacks." Right. So that was one thing that helped me. Right. If I would go to talk to women or something like that, and I didn't get a good reaction, then I could go back and say, okay, what's the feedback? What didn't I do well? Right. And I looked at it more so like that. So that was one thing that helped me early on. Another thing that eventually helped me out a lot was that knowing, you know, someone could be in any type of mood or any type of situation, and it's not going to matter who you are, and they may not want to talk to you. Right. Like, we take rejection so personally that it's something wrong with us. It's a personal offense, right? They didn't like me. They didn't like this. They didn't like that. And if somebody, one thing I also say is the quicker a rejection happens, the less it has to do with you, right? If you dated, if you dated a girl for a long time and she knew everything about you, and then you guys broke up, then yeah, that's going to bother you. I get that, right? But if you go to talk to a stranger and they don't want to talk to you, then what do they really know about you? Do they know your values? Do they know who you are? Do they know your worth? Do they know any of that stuff? They really don't. And some people say, okay, maybe because I'm not good looking or something like that. I have seen very good looking guys, and I've been in amazing shape and things like that, and gone up to women and they want nothing to do with me. All right. And so no matter how you are, who you look, if you couldn't do it or it wasn't the right situation, nobody's going to be able to do it. Right. Sometimes it's just not going to work. So taking less offense and realizing that it's just not going to work out. And it was a quick thing. So it has nothing to do with me personally. That's a huge one. And another thing that I wrote in that book, which no one has ever mentioned before, was that, rejection is contextual. Okay. So if you are going out to a loud nightclub, let's say in Las Vegas at 2 a.m. and you're on the dance floor and you try to talk to a girl and she blows you off, she may be blowing you off and she may not have even looked and seen who you are.
Exactly.
Right? How can you take personal offense to that in a loud, stimulating environment where somebody may be drunk or something like that, and they blew you off? They may not even be registering you at all. Now, let's scale that down a bit. Now, let's say we go to a bar a little earlier in the night. Your amount of rejections are going to be a little bit less now because it's a little bit more chilled. Maybe the music isn't as loud. People aren't as intoxicated and things like that. And you're going to do a little bit better. And they're going to give you maybe a little bit more attention. Now, rejection may still happen there because it's a cold environment. Nobody knows anybody, and they could be hanging out with their friends. Now let's scale it down even further. Let's say you go to a networking event or a house party with friends. Your rejection is going to be almost zero at something like that, right? Hey, I haven't met you yet. What's your name? Like, almost everybody, unless they're crazy, is going to be nice and friendly to you, right? Because it's a house party. It's a warm context. Maybe it's a networking event, or it's any type of event that's around a central theme. People are going to be friendly and nice and open to meeting you. So in that case, you could be the same exact person 2 a.m. at the nightclub that you are at the networking event, but you're going to get 0 rejections at the networking event, and you may get a ton of rejections and people blowing you off at the nightclub, but you're still the same person, right? So you can't take those the same. So it's all about context. And then you add in the mood the girl could be in. She could be married. She could have a boyfriend. Someone could have been really rude to her. They could be on the way to the bathroom. They could have a zillion other things going on. You add in all these factors and you realize that a lot of them are out of your control. And when you start to do that, you say, look, I'm not going to take such personal offense. I'm going to understand that that's the nature of the beast. Rejection is going to happen. And if you want to sit around and play it safe and go to house parties and networking events and wait till somebody gives you eye contact to talk to you, then you could do that. You're going to get no rejections. But, I think it's good to develop thick skin and go out, and it's good for your soul and good for that to talk to people and deal with some negativity, whether you're in sales or you're trying to move up the corporate ladder or you're doing just about anything. Your failure is a part of life, right? And whoever can go forward and learn to deal with that failure usually is going to make things happen, man. There's failure involved in everything in life. And that's what I love, is that socializing and approaching women and stuff taught me how to deal with failure a lot better.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's definitely, and it's definitely contextual. And on top of that, I think you're right. It's like, yeah, you can wait for people to make eye contact with you, and then you're not going to get any rejections, but you're also not going to grow as a person, right? And you're not going to build the confidence that, I think it takes a lot to build that confidence to know that that you're going to get some results, like, but it's going to take a long time. I think a lot, like I was saying, I think a lot of guys, they think that, okay, well, I'm going to go out and try this, and they go and try it one night or two nights, and they get nothing but rejections, and they're like, okay, well, like I said, there must be something wrong with me, and they don't realize that it might take like 50, 100 times, like, especially when you're first starting out, before you're going to get a lot of rejections, but then it'll improve because you'll start to have more confidence. You'll start to come across better. You'll start to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and there's a big difference between coming up and being like, hi, and just coming up confidently, like, hey, what's going on, and so you're not going to develop that until you actually face those rejections. So
absolutely. Yeah, you have to go through that process and smooth things out. And then as you smooth things out, you'll have a higher chance of success. And even once you get smoother, like I said, contextually, you still may get some rejections. You can't take any of it personally.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Like you're always, no matter who you are, you're gonna face some kind of rejection. Even if you're celebrity status, you're still going to face rejections. Like,
I know a guy who used to teach. He would tell stories of A-list celebrities that he's seen personally get rejected. And it's just the nature of how things are, right? Men do the pursuing, especially early on. That's usually how it goes. Women can, but they usually don't, right? And that's just how it is. Like, and from the women's perspective, imagine you're a woman and you don't want to talk to somebody at that moment, right? I mean, that happens, right?
Exactly.
Have you ever been? Another thing I say in the book is, have you ever been at a shopping mall or something and somebody approaches you to try to sell you a product, right? You may tell them no before you even hear anything about the product. The product could be life-changing. You're great, but your instant reflex is to say no, right? And that's just how it is, right? You can't take offense to that. That's sometimes people's instant reflex, especially in certain environments, to just say no off the bat. So it happens. It's the nature of how things are.
I like that example too, about someone trying to sell you something to, like, in a shopping mall, because there's some people that will do it and then you'll say not interested, and they'll just say, okay, sorry to bother you. But then there's some people that will be like, wait a minute, hold on.
And they'll plow forward. Yeah.
Right. And then eventually you're like, all right, fuck, I'm gonna just talk to this guy.
Yeah.
Right. And some people even buy shit. Right. And it's like the same thing. I always think of that attitude. I'm like, nah, if someone's going to reject me, they're going to really have to try hard to reject me, because I'm going to push it. I'm going to be like, no. Hold on. Wait a minute.
Now that's how you get really good.
Yeah.
That's how you get really good, for sure.
But then once I started to realize that, I realized that my control of the rejection was actually in my head. I could choose to be rejected or not. Like, if I could have 100% bat rate of never being rejected if I just chose in my mind that I'm never going to accept a rejection. I'm never going to see it that way. And even if they, quote, blow me off, I'm going to see it through my lens, however lens I want to see it through.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not going to feel bad about it at all. So
yeah, you should gain confidence and give yourself points and credit. I always tell people, give yourself credit for even trying, right? Now you could gain something from every rejection rather than feel like you're losing something, for sure.
And then I think the perception too, I'd be curious to get your idea on this, is I think the perception that a lot of guys have is that, especially going to a bar or a nightclub or something, that they're the only ones that are like not doing anything, sitting around. Whereas in my experience, it's like 99% of guys do not even make one approach. It's like, sure. It's like the one, like, if you're actually even just going up and talking to anyone, you are like in the top 1%.
1%er, yeah. We used to call ourselves the 1%ers back in the day, yeah, because you're the guy who's going for it, for sure.
So that's all you have to do. So I wanted to get from you your books. So what are your favorite books? I'm a big I listen to a lot of audiobooks as well, but what, like, if you had to give maybe top 3 books for someone that was looking to transform their life the way that you did, like mentally, physically, what would you give them?
Okay. Mentally and physically. So, I mean, there were books that were catalysts, right? Like that book, The Game, showed the story. And, the tactics and the stuff in there were really old, and some of it was creepy and whatever. I don't believe in a lot of that stuff anymore, but just seeing that somebody could do it, that book was a catalyst for me. But that was more so the story. Foundational books to make change. I'm big on watching like seminars and YouTube seminars. Like, so I'll watch a ton of stuff on YouTube, and there's a lot of things on there. One of my favorite people for self-development was Tony Robbins when I first started out. And I listened to a CD course called Lessons in Mastery. That one was really big and really formative for me. Like I said, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway was really big for me. When I started lifting weights, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding was really cool. and it had the pictures of the old bodybuilders, which had a really cool classic look.
Exactly.
So it was inspiring as well as teaching me how to do the workouts. And then, you know, books that, as far as mental transformations, one book I recommend to everybody now is Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Dyer. I think he's so awesome. And, you know, anything that you can get your hands on from him. I've watched all his seminars that are on YouTube. I think he's really, really great. And, you know, Tony is great, but Tony and like Gary Vee and some of these other guys are more so on the side of like push, hustle, constant and never ending improvement. And that's awesome for a bit while you have the energy, but there has to be a balance of self-acceptance and self-love, right? I mean, I'm sure this has come up in lots of discussions that you've had as well too. Like, where's the balance between pushing and working hard versus loving where you're at, right? And accepting yourself, right? And having some peace of mind as well. It's always the toughest balance. So, you know, guys like Tony Robbins and stuff like that are good for pushing forward. And then, you know, Wayne Dyer, David Hawkins, those types of guys are cool for, you know, chilling out and accepting yourself and showing yourself love. And what I found is that the more confidence you have in yourself, the more you can give yourself credit, even for rejections and things like that, and be happy with where you are. You clear up all that negativity and beating up yourself, which is a huge thing that my students, you know, struggle with. And I did a lot in the past as well, as beating ourselves. I should have done this. I should have, you know, all that stuff. And when you could kind of let that go and be proud of yourself for even trying and being on your journey, then you free up mental capacity to now work on yourself going forward. So that's huge. Recently, a book called How to Be an Imperfectionist was really great as well too. And there was a cool book I read recently called The Happiness Advantage. And it talks about exactly that. It shows that when you're happy and you feel good, you do 10 times better work. You're more productive, you perform better on tests, and you're just overall way better. So like I said, the pain motivated me back in the day, but to keep things going and going forward, you know, love and acceptance and peace and just feeling good and trying to be, you know, in a good mental state, that helps me be productive and do better work going forward now. So that's kind of where I am with that. But yeah, all those resources are really good.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and especially on Wayne Dyer. I think a lot of people don't. He used to be really big, but a lot of people have kind of forgotten that this guy. He's got a lot of books, really good books. But Erroneous Zones is one of his best ones for sure. Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, I totally agree with you about the balance part of it and the acceptance. Like, I think, you know, one thing, before I could actually make any kind of change in my life, I had to accept who I was and be okay with that, because it was like I was constantly had this filter in my head. I'm like, oh no, you're not that fat. Oh no, you actually do have social skills. It's just that you don't feel like it right now. Like I was making up all this bullshit, and then I just kind of had to say, like, to myself, like, look here, look in the mirror objectively. Okay, you're fucking fat. But it's okay. It's okay. Everyone has to start somewhere. You are scared to talk to people. You're shy. There's no bullshit here. Like, you're lazy. Like, you know what I mean? But I had to accept all that stuff.
Ownership, complete ownership.
And then I can make a roadmap to where I wanted to go. But until I accepted that and was okay with it, like okay, this is fine. This is where you're at. You know, an acorn has to become an oak tree, but it has to be an acorn first. So until I accepted that, I couldn't make any kind of change or movement. So
I love that, man. That's great.
Cool, Joe. Well, okay. So your book, one more time. What's the name of it? And they can get on Amazon.
Yeah, you could go on Amazon and type in Fearless Approach. That's the name of the book. Okay. You could type in How to Approach Women. It's the first one that comes up. I did that on purpose.
Nice SEO there.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I'm active on, as well as my YouTube channel, like, definitely, if you want more self-development and some dating advice and things like that, then my YouTube channel, it's at Joe Ducard. You can just type in Joe Ducard on YouTube.
Yeah, guys, definitely check out his Joe's YouTube channel. I've been checking out really good videos on there, really good content on everything just related to improving yourself, to women, to all those type of things. We'll put a link in the description, probably in the cards as well. So make sure you check that out and subscribe to his channel. And yeah, any parting advice you got for my audience here?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for having me on here. You know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and all that you've done, and you inspire me. And you're a great guy as well too. I know we just met recently, but, you know, I think you're a fantastic person, and thank you for having me on here and allow me to share the message with everybody else. And if anything I want to say to the audience is, you know, those things that you really want, you know, some may be real far-fetched and other things like that, you know, like maybe you want to be Hugh Hefner or you want to be Elon Musk or something like that. And maybe some of those are reserved for the moon, but, you know, I don't want to take any of those away from, you know, the ideal that you have for yourself, how you want to look, how you want to be, how you want people to perceive you, and how you want people to feel when you're around you, you know, and the certain successes that you want to have, go for them, man. I mean, for every excuse, there's somebody with your excuse, and probably even worse, that made it happen. So if anything, just get inspiration from people, not comparison, get inspiration from other people, put in the work. And that's the fun in life, right? It wouldn't be fun if we were born and we had all these things, right? The fun part is the journey, right? Nobody would care for Luke Skywalker if he cut Darth Vader's head off in the first scene of Star Wars, right?
True.
You had to drag everything out across a few movies because the journey is really the best part. So create your own journey, create your own story, enjoy it. And that's really what life is, man. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. Great advice, Joe, and great to talk to you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it, man. Thank you, guys.